Hello ladies and gentlemen, MarauderEX here with a special video. There was a comment posted on one of my videos that just got me thinking, and I kept thinking about it, and I can't stop thinking about it. So now, in order to try to stop thinking about it, I'm going to put it in video format, but I think this is going to be an interesting thing because I think it's going to open up a lot of discussion and a lot of like brainstorming ideas. I really like that sort of thing. So the question was, if the pipe dream of Shining Force 4 were to be made, would you want there to be multiplayer, like my party versus your party? And yes I would. I think that would be an amazing addition to a already fantastic single player experience, is have a great single player experience and then have the ability to have a multiplayer. Like, I think Final Fantasy Tactics, like War of the Lions, totally needed, you know, my party versus your party in one of the various battlefields. Like, that would have been an amazing thing to add to it. Just a new level of strategy. And then as I kept thinking about this, it's like it kind of evolved from what would my favorite Shining Force game, what would my ultimate Shining Force game be, to what would my ultimate tactical RPG be. And that's where I'm at the moment. I've got like so many things. It's like I just want to say this to get it out of my head, but I have a feeling, you know, giving you guys my ideas of what my perfect strategy tactical RPG would be, you guys might be able to take, that idea is great, let's refine it and do this, and like together we'll spitball the greatest game that will never be made. So I'm going to cover a couple of things, you know, that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure I'm going to miss a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm going to do the basics, like, you know, art style, soundtrack, mechanics, story, things like that. So, starting off with the soundtrack, it's got to be just mood appropriate, is my big thing. There are several great composers. I love the Shining Force soundtracks. Shining Force 2 and 3 are two of my favorite soundtracks of all time. I love the music. I love how things fit. Like the really sad Kaizen joins the Force theme. Like, it's just everyone gets joins the Force theme, but Kaizen gets a really sad one because it's a very heartbreaking moment. And then, like most of the battle themes for Shining Force 3, I love the I forget the title of the track, but it's, I'll put it in the description. I think maybe if I can remember to do that. It's the Moonlight. I know it's got Moonlight in the title, but it's just a very somber sounding soundtrack for a battle theme, and it really amazes me. So I love those two, but I also love the Final Fantasy Tactics soundtrack. Trisection is one of my favorite songs ever. It's just it's a battle theme. It's great. It gets me thinking. It gets me pumped. Every time I hear that, I can just like burn through whatever fight I'm in and whatever game I'm in. A couple of times that I've been Let's Playing projects, I've been having a couple of problems with a particular fight. I'm just going to sit there, I'm going to zone out to that song, and I'm going to think about the battle, and then I come back and I just kick the crap out of it. And that's something that I think would be needed in a game like this. So soundtrack, as long as it's mood appropriate, I would give it a shot. So it's like you have to have a varied soundtrack and mood appropriate. Art style, I really don't care either way. I would say, if we're going for like my personal preference in art style, like an interesting mix of sci-fi and fantasy. I keep seeing the development blogs for Battle Chasers Night War, which already is a project that I'm ridiculously excited about. I love that style, that kind of dark, but, you know, science fiction, but then you've got, or the dark fantasy world, but then you've got the science fiction of a giant war golem that's got, you know, machine gun for a hand. I like that, and the Shining series has that to an extent. I think it would just need to be, it would need to be like the Shining Force 3 versions, where you've got technology, but the technology has a dark, sinister connection to it, like the steam engines coming from, you know, the based off Vandal technology and things like that. It's just like, because that kind of started in Shining the Holy Ark with like the Clockwork Knight being an enemy, and then like Blader, the giant robot. So I think that sort of thing would do very well, a mix of sci-fi and fantasy, and then but having a lighthearted tone to it. Shining Force 2 had, it had some technology to it. It's still very bright, very colorful. You don't want the colors to be drowned out. You want there to be a vibrance to the world when there needs to be. You don't want it to be completely dark. That was one of the things that I really didn't like about Final Fantasy Tactics. It's everything in the world seemed just devoid of life. And I know that's kind of part of the point in Tactics, because it is a very dark story, but like, you're in a town completely unaffected by most of what's going on, and it's still just dreary and like, no, you need some bright, vibrant colors, but you also do need areas of contrast. One thing that I could think of is like Quonos Village from Shining Force 3. You've got like bright surrounding area, then you go to Quonos Village, it's like there's a dark aura upon this place. There's a darkness that hangs here. And just being in Quonos just gives you that feeling. And that's the kind of thing that I want. It's like, if you were in a darker area, a place like that, then I want the atmosphere to be like that. But Battle Chasers is kind of it has been my like ideal fantasy setting since I was a kid. I loved the concept of Battle Chasers. So a world similarly designed to that, where you've got, magic and sorcery and swords and intense melee combat, but then you've also got, some guy happens to have a machine gun or something like that, or a laser rifle, and just, it's like, and no one questions this. It's like, it doesn't seem that out of place. It's like, oh, I've heard of that. So that would be my take on it for that. What else we've got? We've got story. Story. It would need to be fairly simple. You can't have it too convoluted, and I think that's the problem with Final Fantasy Tactics and Shining Force 3, is the story gets too convoluted to make a decent sense out of. Final Fantasy Tactics especially, like, I've played through Tactics a couple of times, and I still don't quite understand certain sections of it, because I'm like, I thought this was supposed to be, and it's just, I'm missing a piece of dialogue in the conversation, because I'm trying to wrap my head around everything that's going on. I get the overall story, but then, there are moments in the story I'm like, wait, what? Who? Okay, I missed something. After playing it, several times now. That's yeah. And Shining Force 3 is fairly similar, because I've played Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 multiple times. I've only played Scenarios 2 and 3 once. So it was a very, like, jarring, like, knowing the story from multiple points, and then, but seeing the different side of it for Scenario 2, and then going into Scenario 3, and just everything got a little complicated. I think keep it simple, keep it cliche, even, with Shining Force 2. Just, you've got a very cliche story of good versus evil, unwilling hero gets thrust into this, like, I have to save the world for whatever reason. Like, something simple that, people can kind of get behind. Very simple story, good versus evil, hero drafted in, probably unsure of themselves, inexperienced, but, determined. And that's something that, I think would fit well. But once you start getting into too much, like, you can have political intrigue, but once it starts becoming too much political intrigue, too many backstabbings and reprisals and revenge scenarios, back and forth, you start to lose sight of who's really, like, you stop caring to an extent. Shining Force 3, I by the end of Scenario 2, I did not care about Emperor Dominic at all. And he was the reason why everything bad was happening. So it's like, it's a thing. And there are going to be, people are probably going to go, that's spoilers, you're spoiling your Shining Force 3. I played through Shining Force 3 already, so I can't spoil something I've already done. Those videos are there. And you don't know how it's all being spoiled at the moment, but it's being spoiled. Um, but it's got to be an easy story, and it has to have moments where it can laugh at itself. Like, say, Yaha in Shining Force 2 pulling the plank off the ship and then falling out the back. You have to have a moment where you can laugh at the game. You have to be able to laugh at the characters. You have to be able to laugh at the situation, because if you don't, you're taking it way too seriously. There is humor in all things, even if it is dark humor, even if it is gallows humor. There's going to be moments where you have to be able to laugh, otherwise it's not going to be as relatable. You have to have some sort of lightheartedness, even in the darkest of sections. There's got to be something. There are laughable moments in Shining Force 3, but I don't think there are many in Tactics. There are a couple, but not enough to stand out to where it's like, oh yeah, there was lighthearted sections. No, there has to be some lightheartedness. Lighthearted and a little cliche is where I would go with the story. And then the mechanics. There are so many mechanics that I would love to see be brought into this game. And the games that I've been playing lately, I think, have interesting concepts. I would love for there to be a weapon level system like Shining Force 3. You favor a particular weapon, you're going to become more proficient with that weapon, you're going to get special attacks for that weapon. That makes using a particular weapon more advantageous. Or if you're going to split weapons based off of type, say for example like spear versus lance, one has a long range option, the other is more powerful but only close range. Splitting your time for that for utilitarian purpose versus just instantly everyone's going to be good with like a long range spear, and because they only get the long range spears, like there needs to be a little bit of balance to it. But I think having a weapon leveling system would be very beneficial, as well as a friendship system, a need to have units work together rather than constantly just cycling out. Oh well, I got this new person, or the Fire Emblem example of if you play a little recklessly and lose a character, that there has to be some sort of repercussion to, oh, my comrade died, so, like, maybe my comrade died, instead of, like, permadeath, like, that character's friendship either goes down, or that character who has a friendship rating with those characters, their stats go down. Something like that. Some sort of repercussion so that you're not just rushing headfirst into a fight and sacrificing certain units based off of, whatever their friendship rating is. But some sort of, unit cohesion system. Like, these units work well together, and so therefore you've got this. You can build up that cohesion, or actually build down that cohesion, depending on what calls for at the moment. I would also like to see, like, I love the class system in Final Fantasy Tactics. I don't know how that would apply to a Shining Force style game, but I love the class concept. I love being able to mix and match abilities. So some sort of class customization. Like you could keep the Final Fantasy system, that worked out really well, or you could keep like the Shining Force system where it's like all of these characters are knights, and so all knights have this pool of abilities to choose from, but you can change it so that no two knights are going to be the same. But I think the more customization you have for a unit, the more entertaining it becomes to make it makes the game much harder to balance, but I think it gives the player a larger grasp of, okay, this is my strategy. One thing I always loved about like collectible card games is seeing different people's strategies of even their own take on another strategy. And I think that would apply really well to a tactical RPG like this. So either like the skill system from Final Fantasy Tactics, the skill stone system from Jeanne d'Arc, just way more, extrapolated, like having a ton more to it. I think that would be an interesting balance of, having set classes, as in like the Shining Force style, but the ability to customize. Or if you're just going to open it up and say any character can be of any class, then the tactics system would be a little bit better. Combat, I think there needs to be kind of I like the Shining Force, the Final Fantasy Tactics, 3D isometric overview. I think having that sort of thing, but then the newer Fire Emblem games where it zooms into the battlefield and you see like a higher detail version of the character for the cinematic. And I love the cinematics from the Shining series. And the Fire Emblem series as well now, as they're getting into it. So like that way you can have cinematics for like unique special attacks like Shining Force 3, where you've got like the Twin Blade or Afterburner or Ice Arrow, things like that, that can be done rather than just like the Final Fantasy Tactics where you just you have the little pixel sword. It's neat, but I always loved the zoom-in cinematics where you saw like a much higher detailed version of the characters, like Shining Force and Fire Emblem. And I think with the newer Fire Emblem games, and keeping with the friendship system, having multiple people be able to be involved in an attack, like you can gang up multiple units to attack one thing. I think that would be an interesting thing. A little harder to balance, but it would also be an interesting take on the friendship system. If that's how you can have friendship built up, of have units work in tandem to accomplish certain things, not just have one attack and then another attack afterwards, but actually having both of them in the fight. So I don't care if it were be 3D models or 2D models. Like I could see like a Golden Sun style. You zoom in and you have like the front or the back of the characters, kind of like Shining Force 3. But with special attacks. I think if you go, mildly 3D, like Shining Force 3 or the newer Fire Emblem games, you can have a lot more detail. But you can do a 2D drawn style system, much like Battle Chasers. I'm going to come back to that a couple of times. I apologize, but or like the early concept arts for Bloodstained, like the it's 3D animation, but a very drawn style. But the battle cinematics from Fire Emblem, Shining Force, those have to be there. Like, you can have the map be pretty much whatever you want, but you have to be able to zoom in and see the characters rush in and attack. That's got to be something that I've got to see that. Speaking of design prospect, Camelot. Camelot would have to be involved in it in some way, shape, or form. I've talked a little bit about story. I've talked a little bit about character design and relating things to the Shining Force series. I would love Camelot to be involved in it. I loved their Shining games. They had everything I was looking for. They brought in a world that felt fairly fleshed out for what little bit of these worlds you actually get to see. And they brought in races that, I never would have thought of. Like, until I played Shining Force 2, I never imagined a centaur in an RPG. And now I have a hard time playing a tactical RPG that doesn't have a centaur or a beastman of some sort. So, like, that's something that I would love to see, because Camelot had great race selection. You've got humans, you've got elves, you've got dwarves, you've got centaurs, you've got beastmen, you've got birdmen, you've got mechanical units like Zinc, the robot, or the brass gunners that no one ever used. I apologize. There are people out there who use brass gunners. I was just not one of them. But it was, you had an interesting array. It wasn't just humans. It wasn't just... that's one thing about, like, Jeanne d'Arc that I've been grappling with. It's like, there's a beast man, there's a lion man named Lahire right there, and no one questions this. The demons seem out of place. Like, everyone's like, oh, someone has the ability to summon demons. But the beast man is, like, no one's questioning this at this point. So it's very... There's a juxtaposition there that just kind of gets to me. So it would have to be, like, these are things that are inhabit the world, and Camelot did such a great job with that. Like, they brought in these races that I thoroughly enjoyed. And I would love to see, a centaur with, magic capabilities, carrying a staff, as both maybe offensive and defensive capabilities, magic, very much like kind of a cross between like the Horse Lords in Fire Emblem, but Shining Force style. I think that would be, just thinking about that seems really interesting. Or having a Beastman as your primary spellcaster, or a Beastman as an archer, or something that's just a little different. Because even within the Shining series, all of these characters are all pretty much the same. All centaurs have lances, or bows. Like, you do get the occasional bow knight, but it's I've yet to see a centaur spellcaster in Shining Force. And I know there are reasons for it in the world that they created, but it just make playing games like Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy XI, where any race can be any job, and each one has its own unique take on it. I've always wondered why there's not centaur healers. Why are there not elven swordsmen, things like that. I've always wondered. So, because all the elves seem to be either magic users or rangers, you don't see any of them carrying a buster sword or anything like that. And I think it would be an interesting, juxtaposition to be able to have, a unique unit like that. But anyway, those are the thoughts that I've had. I know that I'm probably missing a ton. There's a lot more, but those are my base. This would be my ideal strategy RPG. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if did I miss? I know I missed something, but let me know what I missed and what you would like to see in it, or if I know what mine is. This is again the ultimate in pipe dreams, because I know this would never happen, because it's either going to be way too complex or not complicated enough, if you can even imagine that. There's just going to be something that's this is not going to be a well-balanced game, so you'd have to take something out or add something in order just to make it work. And I know that because I'm not a game designer. But it got me thinking, what would be my ideal strategy RPG? And now I want to know what your ideal strategy RPG would be. I want to know what you guys, because let's face it, this is the bread and butter of my channel. People come to this channel mostly for either the Castlevania stuff or the RPGs. So I want to know what your guys' strategy RPG pipe dream would be. If you could build it, would they come? That's the question. So what would you build to draw people in? And so this is mine, and I want to know your guys' thoughts on it, and I want to know what you guys would do for your ultimate pipe dream RPG. So let me know in the comments section, or if you want to post a video response, you can send it to me, and I will do my best to find a way to link to it here. So yeah, feel free to do that. I'd love to hear what you guys could come up with. So I will see you in whatever next installment of my pipe dream game would be. So till then, later everyone.